Well, good morning, everyone. If you are new, my name is Sharon. I am one of the pastors here at Bright City. And this morning, we are closing out a series that we have been in for the last 4 weeks called Sent. And this has been based off of a book that some of you have chosen to read alongside this series. But the core of it is helping people to live a life that invites others to Jesus. And so we've talked about having curiosity as we approach people and covering the process of evangelism and prayer. But as we were thinking about where do we want to land, especially in the lead up to Easter, we realized that there really isn't a better place to land than really exemplifying the why we are sent, why we are commissioned to share our faith. And that is because Jesus saves. That Jesus actually changes lives, that we've not been commissioned to go out and correct people or to tell people why they're wrong and we are right, but because Jesus is on a mission to rescue people, and we are here because he has rescued us. And so there's no better way to be reminded of the power of that than through the power of story. And so this morning, I am excited to welcome up our student pastor, Justin Mitchell. Justin, you can come on up. Let's give him a round of applause. But I wanted to share his story with you for a couple reasons. One, just he has a really powerful story, but also a lot of you, because you're new, I know I already asked you this and I've already forgotten. When did you start?
I think it was beginning of February.
Okay.
Somewhere around
there. So already has just been blessing our church in so many different ways, and I wanted you to have an opportunity to get to know him better. And so I want to start out by having you share just very briefly about where you are from, a little bit about your family growing up, whether or not you grew up in church. Just give us a little bit of context.
Yeah, she says briefly because she knows I could probably go on for days on this. I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and then moved to the coast of Carolina in like the Elizabeth City area. Out kind of in the middle of like the Outer Banks and like the Virginia line. That's kind of my stomping grounds. That's where I grew up. And no, I did not grow up in church. Matter of fact, I had no recollection of any church, anything God, no prayer, no nothing until probably about 7th grade was my first interaction with church culture and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
And so a big part of your life, even though you did not grow up in church, a big part of your life now is rap and hip hop. That is your passion. It's just a big part of who you are. And so can you share, because this is going to be, the reason I wanted to start here is that this is going to be sort of a through line for Justin's story. But can you share a little bit about how that became your passion? Because before that, you were really into sports.
Yeah, was not starting out as music. Matter of fact, nobody in my household was musically inclined. No one. My mom was not into. She could play like Mary Had a Little Lamb on the piano. That was about it. Other than that. I listened to music growing up, but yeah, music was not where my life was seemingly headed at the beginning because I grew up playing competitive sports. Baseball and basketball were kind of my main two. And so, yeah, music came in much later. I ended up, I'm from the 1900s, so we had cassette tapes, and we also ended up getting the CDs, the compact discs. Some of you guys may remember that. Some people are probably like, I have no idea what you're talking about. And that's okay. I'm just dating myself. That's fine. But being in sports, like music is a big part of sports culture. And so even in my adolescence, there was music that I was around, the music I was already starting to hear, but the friends that I played ball with and did stuff with, specifically in basketball, like there would be a lot of hip hop intertwined in that. And so because of that, I started kind of really gravitating into the sound of music in hip hop culture, and my friends who were already living inside of those spaces. There was one artist in particular, is the late great theologian Busta Rhymes. I don't know if anybody knows who that is, but a lot of people think that I got my, start in my love for rap music because of Eminem or something, but that's just because I'm white, but that's not true. That is far from the truth. I actually did not even like his stuff at first. But yeah, so I started trying to rap Busta Rhymes early as a kid. And that was like my gateway into like, man, I love like learning the artistic side of the craft of hip hop and rap music specifically. And so, yeah, I would write as a kid in like middle school, and that became kind of an outlet for me alongside of me doing basketball and sports.
So one thing you sort of alluded to, and I want to just put a pin in it a little bit, but to say that early on, even with your love for rap, is that it wasn't something that your parents necessarily understood?
Oh, yeah, no.
Okay.
No. I mean, well, they understood music, but they like, I mean, I grew up on like classic rock stuff with my parents, and then got into like, I mean, they like pop, so Michael Jackson was huge in my house. My mom liked like Tina Turner and stuff like that. So I listened to that growing up a lot, and then when hip hop happened, that's when everything started to flip on its head for me.
So I just want you to kind of make a mental note of that, because that's going to be kind of a theme that comes back. But as you mentioned, it was around 6th or 7th grade was the first time that you were invited to church. So can you share a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, so my invitation was through a friend who played on my baseball team and my baseball team at that time. And so he knew I loved basketball, right? I grew up during the GOAT era, not LeBron. Michael Jordan is the GOAT. I don't care. We can debate outside about that. But I grew up watching Jordan. I always wanted to be Jordan in my head. I was like always outside dribbling and doing stuff, but I didn't have a team to play on. And so there was a church basketball team that existed, and my friends invited me to play on their church team. And they were like, man, if you play with us and this other guy plays with us, like we'll be dominating and we'll win. And I'm like, oh, like we'll be that good. I love winning. I'll go. Like, let's play. Let's do it. And so, yeah, that was kind of my intro to church. And they were like, only thing you have to do is make a couple youth meetings. You make a couple youth gatherings and maybe go do a couple little like service projects around the community, and you could play ball. And so I was like, great, that sounds fun. And so I did that. Didn't really care about the why I was there. I was just there to play ball. And so, yeah, me being there ended up like, I guess, changing and shifting, because I didn't find actual community. It was just like, I'm there for just doing this thing. And there was anything beyond that, it kind of seemed there was nothing.
Yeah, well, it's interesting, this part of your story, because they had this basketball ministry that was a really powerful mechanism for outreach. And yet, ultimately, you did not connect with that church. And there are a couple of reasons for that, if you want to share what those are.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, not growing up in church, this was my first ever church experience in a little Southern Baptist church. So as I'm in this church, I remember I had to wear khakis all the time. I had to wear a button-up all the time. And I just remember that's what my friends would tell me, like, this is what you have to wear to church. And I was like, okay. And my dad loved sports. My dad was like a coach for me a lot in sports that I played, baseball specifically. And so like my dad wanted to get involved with some of the basketball stuff to just be like helping out, but he had to come to church too. My dad didn't want to come to church. He didn't want to go because he felt like, why do I have to dress up like this? Why can't I just wear shorts and like a cut off shirt, or what? Like, why not? Like, if I want to wear sandals, why can't I wear sandals? He's like, Jesus wore sandals, so why can't I? I'm like, really, Dad? Okay. But that was as a young boy, I'm watching my dad, and I'm like, if my dad doesn't want to go, my mom's trying to pull me into church, and I'm like, we didn't grow up in this, Mom. If Dad doesn't want to go, I don't want to go. There's no reason for me to show up and do this. So that was kind of my excuse or my gate to get out of church, on top of the fact that every single time we would gather for youth group, it would be, we'd talk to the youth pastor, about Jesus and how we're supposed to live our life and what honoring God looks like. But all throughout the rest of the week, everybody's just living reckless and doing crazy stuff. And I remember being like, what are we doing? And I just remember being like, I'm out. Like, I have a whole other group of friends that I'd rather hang out with that are way more real than you guys are, because everybody here in the church seems fake. And so I wanted to be with my rapper friends, all my guys who I was rapping with and doing music with. And so I was like, this is where the real stuff's at. So I'm going to go here, and they accept me for being me. I don't have to dress up and put on something. I can just be me. And so that kind of happened, yeah.
It strikes me hearing this, hearing you share this story, how what turned you off to church was not the teachings of Jesus, but how people claimed the teachings of Jesus and then lived differently.
Yeah.
And so it seems like even at such a young age, there was a part of you that recognized how radical Jesus was, and were probably a little bit intrigued by that, but you were so put off by the hypocrisy, the need to put on a certain image that you didn't fit in, all of that. And so you kind of came to this fork in the road where you chose, instead of these Christian friends that were two-faced, you chose these friends who you had a lot more in common with, who were passionate about rap, who you felt like were being more honest. And yet at the same time, as you got older, as you got into high school, what you shared with me is that curiosity about some of those questions never really went away. But also, meanwhile, discovering that these friends that you thought were really real, it was a more complicated picture than you realized. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I thought I was leaving one thing for another, and as I get into living out most of my high school career inside of that space, I think I found myself like what I thought was genuineness, what I thought was this real, and then there was a lot of that, but there's just as much fake stuff happening in that world as it was in the church spaces that I was in. And so I remember just being in this space, being used, because I was the only one with my license, and like I would drive guys around, and we would like park under trees real sketch late at night to go get somebody who needed some drugs picked up, and I would be the guy, and I would just benefit from being with them. And so I was basically seeing myself as this person being used in those spaces just because I was able to get them something, right? It was in that way that I was like, a lot of this stuff seems fake. And so I was already wrestling, and then it became a church invite from a friend later on.
Yeah, so it was your senior year, I think, that
Yeah.
you were invited to a different church by a different friend, and this was a very different experience. And so can you share about that?
Yeah, so my friend, we met in 7th grade, actually, around the same time I had started at that the Baptist church, but this guy had just moved in from like DC area, and we connected instantly because he was all into like Dragon Ball and like anime stuff, and like I was kind of already in that pocket as well, and so like we both just connected off those things and music. And so we've known each other for a while, but he moved away, and then he invited me. He moved like 40 minutes away from where I was living at the time, and so he invited me to hang out at his house, work on some music, because he was on like the drum line, and he was like the Nick Cannon, like if you remember that movie Drumline. So he was like Nick Cannon, but like he could go crazy on the drums, and he would do like the beat machines and make beats and produce. And so I'm rapping, I don't make beats, I'm not very good at that stuff. So I was like, you're good at that, let's work together. And so we started working on something, and I wanted to stay the night at his house. He's like, bro, but if you stay the night, you're gonna have to go to church with us in the morning. And I was like, I don't really do church anymore, man. I don't do that. And so he's like, yeah, but man, like, it's not like the church you were at. I promise. And I was like, how so? He was like, just be you. Like, be you. You can just do that. And I'm like, okay, great. So I purposely wore the most craziest stuff to church just to try and prove my friend wrong, and to be like, this is why I don't go to church. You see, there's people waiting to say something to people like me. I know it. And so I love my friend, but I'm like, I'm gonna show you why church is not good. And so I show up, and if you remember early 2000s hip hop, anybody in here may remember the culture of that. It's very like it's kind of coming back into phase now, but it's like very baggy clothes. So I'm wearing baggy black sweats, black hoodie, probably a bandana on, looking crazy. And I show up, and I remember like feeling like, oh man, I bet everybody's looking at me right now. Probably so, and rightfully so, because I was looking crazy. But we leave the service, and I remember this little old white lady, her name was Miss Helen. She came to me afterwards, at first time meeting her. And I thought she was coming up to me to like yank my hat off or like say a bunch of crazy stuff to me and tell me I needed to have a better outfit on. And she was like, it's so good to see another young person in the church. Like, I'm so glad you're here. These young people are great. Stick with them. And I remember being like, yeah, I know my friend is cool. I don't know about these other fools up here. I don't know. Like, I've not met them yet. So the fact that she was saying so much about them had me interested, because I was like, why are you not afraid of me? Why are you not like, judging me and being, the way that I was accustomed to? And so that kind of started to pique my curiosity. And then I saw like Christian hip hop music videos being played in youth group. And I'm like, I didn't even know this existed. That kind of started to disarm me a little bit.
Yeah, say a little bit more about this was the church where you also discovered the existence of Christian rap. And so share a little bit more about that.
I mean, I had people trying to throw me CDs all the time. Like my friend specifically, the one that invited me, his dad would like bring me CDs every so often and be like, hey, check out this guy, because he knew I listened to stuff like hip hop. So he's like, here, take this. And it was like, Gospel Gangsters. Like, who is this? And I was like, this already sounds crazy. Like, and like I listened to it. That was an actual group name, like legit. Like I'm not making this up. And so they're legends in the space of Christian hip hop. But at the time, I didn't know that. I didn't know who these people were. I'm listening to like hard stuff. I'm listening to DMX, listening to Rough Riders, listening to just wild stuff. And so I'm listening to that stuff, and then I'm listening to what Christian rap was, and I'm being like, this stuff sounds corny. It sounds so bad. And then I'm in this youth group, and I see some of this Christian rap being played in music videos and stuff, and I'm like, wow, okay. I didn't know that I thought Christians were just looked like this. I didn't know that I could fit in here. And so that was the start. And I think I went to like Walmart one time and like was looking for a CD. It was like, God, if you were real, like, and I didn't really say that, but I was just like, God, like I really need something that speaks to me. And like, I'm looking for, in this small Christian section, an album. And I remember there was an artist by the name D.A. Truth. I was like, nobody spells their name D.A. and not be a rapper. Like, it's just not. So I picked it up and I looked at it and I was like, I'm gonna put this in. And as soon as it came on, it instantly just connected with me from the moment that it started, because it was exactly the same stuff that I was already accustomed to in the culture. And so that was kind of my introduction to like Lecrae and all these guys early on, and that just opened me up. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing I just remember you telling me when we talked about this earlier this week is that artist, The Truth, you said that he probably taught you more theology than your pastor.
Yeah, I mean, those guys were rapping like literally over top of a rap beat, a hip hop beat. They were literally, I didn't know this at the time, but looking back on it, I'm like, wow, I'm learning theology and understanding like a Christ worldview that I never was really getting from just a pastor on a stage. Mm-hmm. So it was ministering to me. So I tell people all the time, I'm not where I'm at if God didn't use the creative space of hip hop to reach me, for sure.
And another thing that you said when we were talking earlier this week that I thought was really profound and really beautiful is that when you first encountered like truly good rap about faith, like it was a truly artistic expression of the soul, that was the moment when you realized that God didn't hate your music. Yeah. And I think there's a lot underneath that, and I want to come back to that as well. But this church, because they accepted you as you were, and because you felt like you belonged there, it created this space for you to wrestle with some of these questions. You know, I think a lot of folks, they recognize like Jesus's teachings have a ring of truth. You know, wherever you are spiritually, when you first read scripture or hear Jesus' teachings, like you know it is true. But it can take a while to get to the point of surrendering your life to him. And so you needed that time and that space and that environment where you felt safe to just ask those questions. But what then brought you to the point of making the choice to surrender your life to Christ?
So I mean, my senior year, as my life was starting to change, my mom took me out for like lunch right before I graduated, and she was like, hey, I really never had a reason to tell you this story. She said, my mom was a teacher. She's taught special education her whole life, in her adult life. And then my dad was in construction. And so we move here, and that's what my parents are doing. And so she's like, I never had a reason to kind of share this with you. She's like, but when we moved here, you and your brother were outside playing one time, and there was this moment where I'm reading a book in this trailer park that we're living in, and I'm watching you and your brother play, and you just started you stood up and just started talking. And I was like, Justin, like, who are you talking to? And then you didn't answer me. So she's like, I asked again. I said, Justin, like, what are you doing? Who are you talking to? And she said, she's like, and then you turned around and you just said, Mom, I'm talking to God. And I just turned around and kept talking. And so I remember hearing that story for the first time as a 17, 18-year-old boy. And I'm like, what is that? Like, and my mom's like, I'm watching your music change, the stuff you're talking about, that your writing is different. You're driving 40 minutes as a senior in high school to a Bible study. Like, I wasn't doing those things as a senior in high school. Like, something is different. And I just need you to know this because I just feel like you need to know. And I remember wrestling with that all throughout like my beginning parts of college, and then just little happenstances and little things popping up that just were like, oh my gosh, like I see God's hand in my life so much so that he's been pursuing me, and I'm done trying to do this myself. And so I just remember being by my bedside on my knees and being like, God, like, I'm done. Like, I white flag, take my gifts, take my talents, take my time, and just use it. I don't have much, but I'm gonna give it to you. So yeah, that was kind of the 2006 that happened, and that changed the trajectory of everything.
So fast forward from that moment when you are a college freshman to today, where you are now a pastor.
Not on my bingo card.
And one of the things that you said to me that I thought was so interesting, but probably reflects the way a lot of people feel, is that even though you now work at a church, you said that you still very often feel like you don't fit in with church culture. Can you share a little bit about why that is?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes I've always felt kind of misunderstood in a way. And I think, like, I've said this before to various crowds and different people, is like, I've often been like, I've come to this conclusion and realization. Oftentimes I'm either too black for the white church or I'm too white for the black church. And I never really understood how to fit in that space. And I'm like, I don't know what to do, because the church seems like they don't know what to do with me. God's people don't know what to do with me because of my skill set or my giftings and things that God has equipped me to do, and like what I'm already doing. And like some of that stuff just doesn't fit inside of this box of things. And so I didn't really feel like anybody understood that. And so, yeah, it was a hard change, I guess, for myself. But I still wrestle with that sometimes, to be fair.
So I bet there are people here who feel that way as well, who walk into a place like this and feel like they don't belong in church. And so what would you say to someone who also struggles with that?
Yeah, a couple things. I'm trying to make this short as much as I can. But I would say Ephesians talks about we are God's masterpiece. We are his masterpiece. And I feel like when I read that for the first time, I remember doing some study on it and being like, another word for masterpiece was like God's poem or his poema. And I remember being like, wow, like that is huge, because as an artist, I write my lyrics, I write all my stuff. And so like that connected with me to be like, wow, God, like I am God's poem. I'm his rap, right? Like what he's writing, right? He's writing this thing out, and he's like, as proud as I am of my stuff, God is looking at me like, hey, I'm proud of you. But that comes from a father looking at his son. And so for me, I've had to wrestle and come to this idea of also understanding, like, before I'm a youth pastor, before I'm a husband to my wife and to a father to my kids, before I'm any of that, I'm a son before I'm anything else. And so out of understanding that in its fullness, it's allowed me to operate in such a confidence that, like, when I walk in places, like, I know this may be a thing, but I've got to walk in my sonship first. Yeah.
Yeah, when Justin said that to me, just the way you phrased it earlier was, I had to settle into my sonship. And I've thought about that so many times since you said it. I thought it was so profound, because the culture that we are in places so much emphasis on identity and emphasizes how important it is for you to know who you are and how you're special. And that is actually very important. But if that is your primary identity, if your identity, your primary identity is anything other than being a child of God, what you will ultimately experience is that identity is going to separate you. Because what you experience is, if my primary identity is being a hip hop artist, and I walk into a space where nobody else gets me, then I now feel isolated from them. But if your identity is, I am a child of God, there is no room that exists that you can walk into where that is not true. And so I think that is a really powerful reminder that yes, get to know who God created you to be, and we're going to return to that in just a moment, but that your primary identity has to be you are a child of God. It's so powerful, Justin. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Can y'all give him a round of applause? And again, if you have not gotten to know Justin, I hope this was helpful just to give you a taste of what he's like. And he has such a powerful call on his life, and we're so honored to have him here at Bright City. And so we said this when we first commissioned them into the church. Please take them out for a meal. And so if you have not done that, please take them out for a meal. But thanks again, Justin. That was so great. And as we close out the Sent series and just reflect on Justin's story as well, there are two takeaways that I want you to carry with you. The first was a theme that ran throughout Justin's story, and I wanted to highlight it because it is also extremely common in our culture right now. That's important to understand. If we're going to talk about being sent, if we're going to talk about inviting people into this community, one thing that we have to understand about this culture specifically is that belonging comes before belief. For many people in our culture, they need to feel like they belong before they are ready to take that step of belief. And that's true for a number of reasons. One is that we are in a nation where there is an epidemic of loneliness, but then also in this region specifically, we are a very transient region. And so that felt need of belonging is especially close to the surface. People are still also asking those questions of meaning and purpose as well. But that felt need of belonging is one that is closest to the surface. And it's why we at Bright City, we want to be creating more spaces for people to experience belonging here at our church. It's why we're kicking off the Alpha course this week for the spiritually curious. But it's also why we have events like the Easter egg hunt, which is going to be fun. Our kids are going to love it. But that's not really why we're doing it. This is an event where you can invite friends who might not come on Sunday morning, but would feel comfortable coming to an event like that so that they can belong and then have that space, that environment to wrestle with those meatier questions of the meaning of life. So that's the first takeaway that I want you to take from this, is the importance of belonging before belief. And then the second beautiful thing about Justin's story is the reminder that you, in your particularity is an entry point for someone to encounter Jesus. That's what we saw with him going to this church where there were other rap, hip-hop artists, and this realization, oh, God doesn't hate my music. The fact that the most theology he learned was from another rapper. This is going to take so many different forms, but it's a powerful reminder that whatever hobbies, whatever passions, whatever interests, even if you think this has nothing to do with God, to know that God made you that way to be an entry point for someone else to Jesus. So whatever that means for you, whether it's your interest or maybe it's just your stage of life, there's something particular about your stage of life to know that whatever is unique about you is not about you. It is for the glory of God and the love of other people. So in just a moment, we are going to head into our time of communion. And as we do, as we prepare our hearts for communion, I'm going to invite our prayer team forward now. But as we prepare our hearts for communion, I want to remind us that what we are celebrating when we take communion is not just the life and the death of Jesus, but that in order for Jesus to die, he had to become human. which is to say, he had to become particular to you. And so let's take a few moments right now to simply reflect on that, the good news of that Jesus has pursued you, that Jesus is pursuing you, that Jesus entered into this world, took human form to understand you. And take some time now to reflect on the ways that Jesus has met you in deeply personal ways when you needed him.